Thanks, Kate. Thank you, Linda. It's really nice to be back at this conference, and a little unfamiliar to me being on this side of the microphone, but I appreciate the opportunity. As Kate told you, I've been the executive director of the Governor's Workforce Board for just 3 months, and prior to that, I worked for 17 years. Thank you. I served as the director of the United Nurses and Allied Professionals, and in that capacity, I did have the opportunity to help start and lead a program called Stepping Up, which is a career ladders program for folks who are aspiring to obtain jobs in the healthcare industry or move up the ladder into higher paid, often licensed jobs in the healthcare professions. And that program how many people here have had some contact with the Stepping Up program? Quite a few. And that program has served as a model in many ways for the initiatives, and it's representative of the initiatives that the Governor's Workforce Board is pursuing, because it has a number of the critical elements that we believe are essential to workforce development programs. So for starters, Stepping Up is really an employer demand-driven program. It wouldn't exist but for the fact that healthcare employers have had a compelling need to address their current and projected workforce shortages, particularly, again, in the licensed field. So employer demand addressing a skills gap. Secondly, a collaborative program that engages many partners from different parts of our workforce. So it's a labor management partnership. It's a multi-employer partnership between competing health systems. There's multiple unions as part of Stepping Up. It's actually now north, south, and central in Rhode Island, so several different regions of the state. And multiple funders as well, both private and public sector funders. And again, those are the types of elements that we are looking to create as we continue to build our workforce system. So what is the Governor's Workforce Board? Not unlike Economic Development Corporation, not a household name, so I'll tell you what it is. It's been around in its current configuration since 2005, and it actually joined together the boards and the missions of two separate entities. One, the Human Resource Investment Council, which oversees the expenditure and programs flowing from the Job Development Fund, more about that in a minute, and also the State Workforce Investment Board, which is responsible for overseeing policies, programs, funding from the Federal Workforce Investment Act. The Governor's Workforce Board Sorry, get used to my technology here. So the Governor's Workforce Board has 17 members on the board, and Connie Howes, who is the CEO of Women Infants Hospital, serves as the chair of the Governor's Workforce Board. There we go. So in a nutshell, the Governor's Workforce Board sets policies and goals and guidelines for all the employment and training programs in the state of Rhode Island. And our core mission is to increase the skills of Rhode Island workers to meet the workforce needs of Rhode Island employers. The board also serves as the primary advisor to the governor on workforce development programs. Now, the Job Development Fund, as I mentioned, this is the funding source that supports the Human Resource Investment Council and now the Governor's Workforce Board's investments in the state of Rhode Island. The Job Development Fund is actually comes from a small fraction of a percent of the unemployment contributions that are made by Rhode Island employers. So employers pay payroll tax into the unemployment system. A small fraction of those funds are set aside to train and retrain Rhode Island workers in hopes of reducing the frequency and duration of unemployment and to develop the skills of future workers. This is just a quick graphic illustration of the where the Governor's Workforce Board sits and how it integrates with the other parts of the workforce system. So there's the governor. On the left are the two funding streams that I mentioned, the Job Development Fund and the Federal Workforce Investment Funds. The Governor's Workforce Board works very closely with the two local workforce investment boards that cover the state of Rhode Island, and is also working with what Keith has described as the upcoming Jobs Cabinet, the Governor's Jobs Cabinet. What's not on here but should be is also the employer community, and they really inform all the work of the workforce system, and I'm going to talk more about that. One of the things that the Governor's Workforce Board was charged to do when it was first convened in 2005 was to develop a strategic plan for workforce development for the state of Rhode Island, and it undertook that effort a couple of years after its formation, and it engaged well over, I believe, 150 partners in the process, and out of that came a very comprehensive 5-year strategic plan that that established 4 major goals for the state of Rhode Island: a system goal, goal for employers, goal for adults, and goal for youths. And I'll talk about each of those in a minute. Each of those goals, in turn, had about six or so objectives under each one, and a variety of different strategies to achieve those goals. So, pretty ambitious strategic plan. The first goal, which are the system goals, is simply to improve the effectiveness of our workforce system to address the needs of Rhode Island employers and job seekers. And to do that, the Governor's Workforce Board works with all the stakeholders in the workforce system. And when I say stakeholders in the workforce system, we're talking about the education system, whether that be K-12, higher education, private trainers. We're talking about the state system, so that's the Department of Human Services, which works with transitioning folks in the TANF program to jobs, people who are collecting unemployment insurance, people who have been dislocated from one job to another, people who are new to the workplace, to the workforce, and the local workforce investment boards that I mentioned. The leadership of the Governor's Workforce Board takes many forms. Essentially, we convene partners, we plan strategies, we coordinate efforts, we promote services that are available, we measure the results of our efforts, we report the outcomes, and we project the future challenges that the system will face, and we advocate for resources, all to inform Rhode Island's workforce development system. Our second goal, our employer goal, is to increase employer commitment to developing a highly skilled workforce. The board has many strategies in which it engages employers to meet both employer needs and the needs of current and future employees. Just to touch on a few, one I'd like to mention is our comprehensive workforce training grants, which are simply incumbent worker training. This is a unique opportunity we have in Rhode Island. A lot of states don't have funds for this, but the Job Development Fund makes it possible for us to provide matching contributions to employers who are looking to upgrade the skills of their workers so that the company can remain competitive, and so those workers can continue to also have the skills that that they need to keep a job and to grow in the workplace and obtain better jobs. Secondly, we have what I think is one of the most important initiatives of the Governor's Workforce Board is our industry partners. And this is reflective of what we call a sector approach. So we recognize that while there are thousands of businesses in Rhode Island, there are a number of key sectors of our economy which really will shape the future and our future success as a state. And those sectors are supported by the Governor's Workforce Board by creating industry partners that help to inform the workforce system about the current and future needs of each of those sectors. And they do that by, they have done studies and produced what we call skills gap reports on where the mismatch is between the needs of the employers and the skills of Rhode Island workers, as Keith was referring to. They also do projections of future labor market needs, and that informs the workforce system. They have provided direct training, both pre-employment training, like the Stepping Up program that I mentioned, as well as post-employment training to people already in the industry. And all of these efforts are, again, to ensure that the workforce system is as grounded as possible in the real-world needs of the employers who make our economy and our jobs progress. The third goal is related to adults, and that goal is to prepare all adults with the knowledge and skills they need to meet the demands of a changing workplace and economy. Many adult education services in the state of Rhode Island are supported both by job development funds and federal workforce investment funds. And those funds support a variety of adult education efforts, which include what many people think of as traditional adult education, such as English as a second language classes, high school equivalency classes, remedial reading and writing program classes, and so forth, as well as other innovations that more closely connect the adult education programs with the skills that the students and future employers are looking for. So those would be adult education programs that are contextualized to specific industries and specific occupations, for example. And finally, the fourth overarching goal of the Governor's Workforce Board strategic plan is a youth goal, and that is to ensure that all youth are ready for work and lifelong learning. And as we know, our schools and our youth face many challenges. The Governor's Workforce Board, again, along with Federal Workforce Investment Act funds, supports what's known as YouthWorks 411. We have 16 youth centers throughout the state which provide an array of services to all youth to help them learn the expectations of the workplace, explore various career options. They provide opportunities to do job shadowing, mentoring, internships at various businesses, and also direct employment opportunities, as well as efforts to support students to be able to stay in school through tutoring and other supports, and if need be, high school equivalency classes for those who did not finish high school. So you've heard some of this, just a quick, again, a few fun facts, or not really so fun, about the current workforce challenges. As I think Julian said, in Rhode Island, 16.5% of Rhode Island adults have not finished high school. Those are folks who are in the labor force. Another 27.2% have not gone beyond high school, so they completed high school but have no further schooling. Also, Rhode Island's population growth is all amongst the foreign-born. So the native-born Rhode Island population is not increasing. In fact, it has slightly decreased, I believe. And all our population growth is coming from folks who were born in other countries, many of whom, not surprisingly, speak English as a second language, and in many cases not all that well, and not, in some cases, well enough to obtain many of the jobs that are currently available. And finally, I think Julian referred to this as well, 2/3 of future job openings here in Rhode Island as well as nationally are expected to require at least some post-secondary education or training, and naturally that training is less available to those who are not proficient in English or have not completed high school. Now, Rhode Island's needs for education and training and jobs are increasing, but our resources to meet this challenge are decreasing. everyone knows our unemployment rates, particularly since the Governor's Workforce Board launched its strategic plan, our unemployment rate has climbed. Our employment rates have diminished. Job development funds and Federal Workforce Investment Act funds are less available now than they were at that time. We are resource challenged, and the projections, especially at the federal level, are dire. Our Federal Workforce Investment Act program in total is at risk of, its very survival is at risk, and even if it does survive, the prospects for funding cuts are virtually certain. To compound this challenge, in this current fiscal year, the Governor's Workforce Board faced a very difficult financial situation because last June, the legislature, in order to balance the budget, reduced the state's allocation to adult education programs by $2.3 million. And in order to repair that budget hole, the legislature decided to direct or take $2.3 million from the Governor's Workforce Board to fill that hole. The problem with that is it still left a net of $2.3 million less in the overall workforce system. And I should add that the Governor's Workforce Board already provides and had allocated $3.5 million to adult education. So the Governor's Workforce Board, as I mentioned, is a major supporter of adult education. However, between the sort of voluntary and involuntary funding of adult ed, the combined total of $5.8 million from the Governor's Workforce Board represents nearly 70% of all the Governor's Workforce Board's funds, and that resulted in a real difficult loss to funding for incumbent worker training, youth programs, and other important priorities of the Governor's Workforce Board. We are pleased that in the Governor's budget, he has proposed to restore that $2.3 million to adult ed out of general revenues, and we hope that, we are hopeful that the legislature will do likewise. Just a few things about what the Governor's Workforce Board is up to right now, and then I want to make some comments about jobs. The Governor's Workforce Board, because we are challenged to do more with less, as everyone is, has undertaken an effort to finely tune its priorities. Of the many objectives in our strategic plan, we have adopted several as our short-term priorities, and those include increasing employer investments in training, increasing the number of employers who offer opportunities for upward mobility through career pathways, increasing employer involvement in apprenticeship programs, and just this morning, the Governor, at the Governor's Workforce Board meeting, signed a decision approving the newest apprenticeship program in the state of Rhode Island. The first time ever we've had an apprenticeship program in the information technology field at a company called Atria Networking Corporation in Warwick, I believe. So borrowing from the tradition and successes of the building trades apprenticeship programs, we're now developing new models of apprenticeships in other industries where workers can learn and earn at the same time. Also, a priority is to increase the skills and credential attainment of adult learners. And when I say credentials, I mean credentials that matter to employers when they show up for a job. And also, likewise, credential attainment amongst youth. The Governor's Workforce Board is also redoubling its efforts to have greater employer engagement and participation, so again, that we can be as responsive as possible to employers. And just recently, again today, at our meeting, we announced several initiatives to fund short-term employment and training programs. No easy task. We can't manufacture jobs, but on the other hand, we do know that with the right training and incentives, unemployed workers can be skilled up to compete for certain jobs, and also employers can be incented to hire those unemployed workers, and that's what our initiative that we announced today will do in both the healthcare industry, hospitality industry, and information technology. So, whose job is job creation? This is sort of the million-dollar question in some ways. Everyone talks about the need for jobs, and in some respects, it's really no one agency's jobs, and of course, it's everyone's job. But when I took this job, I've been on the job for 3 months, and people say to me, "So how come the unemployment rate is still above 10%? You've been on the job for 3 months." And in the world of workforce development staff are quick to point out, well, we don't hire people, we train workers, we don't create jobs. And I suspect in the world of economic development, there's a similar dynamic in which, because economic development, I think it's fair to say, grows and supports businesses, but they don't create, economic development certainly doesn't create jobs directly either. But each agency can and does have a significant impact on job creation, and that, of course, is why the governor, as Keith referred to, is convening a jobs cabinet to focus the attention, the personnel, and the resources on the priority of job creation. I can tell you from the perspective of the Governor's Workforce Board, we share this commitment to jobs creation. That's why we announced these short-term initiatives today, and we are also determined to work to align our efforts as much as possible with the economic development strategies of the state. Oops. Okay. And in order to do that, we believe and we know that our workforce development efforts will be smarter and more effective if they are informed by a better understanding of business trends, state strategies, and employer needs. And likewise, economic development efforts will be enhanced by a better understanding of the labor market, of training education and education programs that are available in the state, and other services that can support the work and address the workforce needs of current and prospective businesses. Also, I mentioned the sector strategies that we have working with industry partners. We need and want to align the sectors that we work with the sectors that economic development is also pursuing and strengthening. And finally, I would just note that rebuilding an economy takes a long time. So does rebuilding an education system or a workforce. So there are no quick fixes, but job creation provides us with an opportunity to appreciate the challenges that we each face and to support each other in our respective but interconnected missions. And I look forward to doing that with our partners in the workforce and economic development system. Thank you.